Hello, this is Charles Batson with the second episode of Journeys Through Queer Circus. This time a conversation with Phia Ménard, groundbreaking trans artist originally hailing from France. We go on this massive journey through an understanding of queerness, of light, of art. You'll see that I laugh, you'll see that I cry, because I was moved. Before we had this conversation, Phia and I had met briefly to talk about what sort of images we might be able to use to accompany this particular conversation on what it might mean for her to be queer, to make queer art, and to contribute to a queer understanding of the world. Her first answer, Maison. So, as we move into a conversation about that later in the interview, I'd like to introduce Phia herself after we see these three images from that production. So hello, Phia Ménard.
Hello, Charles.
How are you tonight? Today it's for me and tonight for you. How are you?
Oh, yeah, it's tonight now in Belgrade, Serbia. No, it's not really tonight. It's, I think, 7:30 p.m.
Okay, good.
Oh, it's okay. It's just the time to drink.
It's a magic hour. You say something very tempting because it's only 1:30 in the afternoon. I am in my office here. I have to be professional. I cannot drink yet. Cannot drink yet. I am excited that our viewers and our listeners with CircusTalk will be discovering you and will be hearing your voice and seeing you in this recording, including some of the images from your work, Maison. I understand in English it's called Mothership. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. The Mother House or something like this.
Or Mother House.
Yeah. It depends. It depends of all translation. So for me, it's a Mother House.
Excellent. That's my home translation for that. Well, we'll talk about that in just a minute then. I'm looking forward to that. But here's a question I have for you, if that's okay, that I'm asking everyone in this series, and I am so honored you're a part of the series. So that question is, what does the world need to know about you? You as a performer, as an artist, as a creator. What is that thing that we need to hear?
Sure, I'm a performer. I'm sure of that. And I'm an artist.
Yeah.
Now I'm 50 and I think I can say, okay, I'm an artist, sure, because I can't do anything more than art. So it's depend of different kind of works. But in fact, I'm juggler. So it was my entrance to art. And now I can say, okay, I'm a artistic director or artist. But I like to continue to say, I'm a performer.
Oh, tell me more about that. What does that mean for you?
A performer? It's mean, in French language, performer, it's a very strange word because in fact, we use this word for visual art. In general, we said performer for visual art when you do a performance inside a factory or in a gallery or a museum. But in fact, we never used on the theater. But in English, on the American, I think performer, it's a global situation of an artist on stage. So I think I'm an artist of performance because I go on stage to practice with my body and to try to create some emotional things with these bodies. And perhaps it's mean performance, it's a fight every day to continue to practice to continue to be sure that a body can be more in the great sensation with the world and the cosmos, perhaps. I don't know. Perhaps that's it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you. Beautiful. Ah, and I wish you a pleasant beer.
Yeah. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers. So you mentioned juggling. So it is true that this series is looking at Journeys Through Queer Circus is its title. And you mentioned that juggling is maybe a first art or a second art for you. Can you tell us more about your work as a juggler?
In fact, it was for me a very important meeting because when I was student, I worked to be a student with a worker for surgery, and it was a very strange way. And when I met the juggling art practice, because I think at the beginning it was like a game, you know, you practice with many other person on the grass, and you just play with diabolo and juggling balls, and but in fact it was the first time I realized that I can do something with my body, and who it should be an expression of my who I am and what is it exactly to be on this act. So it was really the base of a spiritual thinking. And when I was 19, I saw a beautiful, incredible show by Jerome Thomas, a master of juggling arts. And it was for me a shock. And I decided to only practice juggling arts and to change my planning. I don't want to go to school, but I want to learn dance, mime, puppet, and theater. So I decided to change and practice everything. But it was the juggling art who was for me the most important. And 1.5 years after, I was on a workshop with this Meister, Jerome Thomas, and at the end of this Meister class, he decided to invite me to be a student. So I became a student with Jerome Thomas, and it was during 10 years practice together, and it was really a beginning of my life, I think so, because it was the moment I realized that the powerful of art and the powerful of juggling art. It was very important for me to understand why this guy can be create something, some shows, very incredible dancing shows and juggling art in the same way. And it was the beginning of my first tour around the world and in a new world. So that's my first entrance with juggling art. So it was wonderful. And I met many different junglers and different dancers. And when I was student with Jerome Thomas, he just called to me, okay, now you must go to meet different kind of professional. So it was a different moment of practice in my life to study dance art with Hervé Diasnaz and different experience of art. And in 1998, I decided to create my first show. So during 1995 to 98, it was a very long period for 3 years, very intensive juggling arts every day, non-stop juggling arts and wonderful,
Mm.
wonderful period.
So, yeah, the connection you're speaking of and the spirituality related to the physicality, that those are always and forever joined for you is a language I'm hearing.
Mm.
Um, do you want to, before I leap into another question for you, I'm intrigued by this foundation of your company in '98, you said, and
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by the name of your company. Could you
Not
tell us
Nova.
more about, yeah, could you tell us more
Yeah,
about that?
you know, it's become a Latin expression.
Mm.
This expression said non nova sed nove, and the translation in should be we don't invent nothing. So we just try to create differently. So it was important for me because it's a joke, you know. If you remember this period, it was a very important period for information. It was just after the Balkan War. It was a different period of the life, very strong.
Yeah.
And I was in this situation to understand. I was there in Balkan. I was with my group to work in Kosovo, and I remember when I decided to create this company, this name, it was very important for me to say, okay, is there only three subjects? I think it's life, love, and death. And it was very important to say, okay, I don't want to say I can do something. No, I just want to create more and more question about the life, about love, and about death. So that's the reason of this name.
Yeah, powerful. The second bigger question I'd like to sort of start this conversation about is not only about you and about you as the circus performer, but this is a journeys through queer circus is what we're talking about, and I'm intrigued to start with that. Queer. What is this for you? How does this sit for you? What does this mean for you? What's its power as a word? Does it exist? The art that you do? Queer. I send that word over to you and you return it back to me.
I think I'm very attached to the beginning of this word.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's mean, you know, when some people decide to practice life as they want. So it's really, for me, it's thinking sincerity. It become very important to be sincerity in the society of fake. So queer, it's for me this relation, a possibility to create our life as we want, and to forget the judgment, and the possibility to be in the life, to be on life. So for me, queer is like this. And I think if I was not transgender, I should be queer too.
Even
Because
trans, yeah.
because I think really it's a spirituality of life to say, okay, we never, I say very often, I never choose to live, I never choose to birth, but I choose to continue to live. So it's very important, if we want to continue to live, to accept that each person can try to find the good way for them, or for me and for you. It's very important. So that's the reason I say, okay, I was cross-gender, I was transgender, I was a man with many questions about identity, about sexuality, about, but in fact, I'm an artist, and I think if I was an artist, a male artist, I become queer too, sure of that.
The questions of making queer that you speak of with such power and such words. Here I am in my office, and I don't know if you can see my eyes responding to what you're saying, because I too was there in the 90s and lived those powerful changes, and knew as well myself that in the 90s this was queer. This was queer. Yeah. There's something about transitions, I think, that's interesting. And much of your work, if I'm understanding correctly, from indeed the foundation of your company from 98 and then beyond, there's much to do about transition, changing states and changing matters. There's ice on stage, and ice that always changes shape and form. I'm wondering if you can speak to that, about maybe the trilogy of the queer and the materiality and transition.
I think the basis was a reaction. When I was a male, when I was a juggler on stage with all the objects of juggling art, I was in during a period of very strange situation, because I was okay, perhaps something like a virtuosity of juggling art. And during this period, it was very strange, because I was in this different kind of question of my identity. In the same time, the audience applauds this male. And for me, it was a period of very intense reflection about, okay, you want my virtuosity, and you watch this guy, this man, who do very virtual juggling art. But in fact, I want to say to you, it's not a male, it's another person. I don't know who is there. I don't know if it's her exactly, but sincerely, it was the moment who I decided to change all my practice. So that's a joke, but I tried to, it was my first act, it was to destroy my object and choose other object. And my first object was to try to juggling with cactus. And to say, okay, now what kind of virtuosity I can do with a cactus? It's nothing, it's bullshit. But in fact, it was a moment, or this for audience, it was the moment of what's happened. And for me, it was very important to do that, because it was the moment of reverse situation, to say, okay, now you are not in this situation to be a sacralization of the artist, but you are in this moment of what's happened, and you feel something like empathy for my problem. And it was very important, because it was the moment I realized, okay, I must do a coming out, I must do a transition, and it's necessary to find a new relation between my art, juggling art, and the audience and my body. So it was the period who I decided to work with material and elements, and the first was ice, because it was for me exactly the material or element who can be a best mirror of the transition. Because when a person say, okay, I'm not a man, I want to be a woman. So it's a coming out. And after, it's a period of transition. This period is very dangerous. And at this moment, I decide to say, okay, with eyes, I can explain something. We want to see eyes because it's beautiful. It's marvelous to watch every day how a small ice cube or a big cube of glass of ice, and you feel that's a very intense relation between this material and the body. But in fact, you don't want to touch this body because it's cold, and you know it's very cold, but you don't want. So it's a moment of repulsion and attraction. And in fact, for a transvestite and a person who decide to change gender, it's this something like this. You feel that you create some desire, so it's attraction, but nobody want to be with you, so it's repulsion. So it was for me my reflection to say, okay, now I must work with all elements to create this relation, because everybody have a relation with material, with element. So it's a new object for me, and it was my transition to say, okay, now I'm continue to practice journaling art, but a new journaling art with element, and it's a new practice and possibly a new kind of performance.
I'm hearing, I heard it intriguing, and enjoy, cheers again, cheers to that.
Yes.
You used a word about empathy, I think, right? That you
Yeah,
were, that the
empathy.
audience is called to understand the work, the art, and the meaning, and some of the pain, and the struggle, and some of the beauty at the same time. Is there, might I ask the question, are is there going to be maybe a different audience for an audience that may identify as queer from an audience that identifies as not queer or straight? Or are there mainstream audiences? Are there different audiences that might respond differently? I'm wondering what you might think about that.
I think it was a chance for me, because in fact, I was not on a queer audience,
Mm.
but a very mixed audience.
Okay.
And it was very important to do that, because in fact, if we are playing for our community, it's not interesting.
Yeah.
Because the most important, it's the political issue of this. So during, for this example, with PPP, this show with eyes, it was during 10 years relation between a very mixed audience. Sometimes there's some transgender inside the audience, but 1, 2, 3.
Mhm.
Sometimes parents. And for me, it was very interesting, because it was parents who try to understand why the child decide to change. And it was each time a possibility to discuss, to try to create a discussion about, okay, I remember every time I say, it's really good, because now you become a really beautiful person in a good way. Imagine during many years the problem. Imagine after. It should be incredible, your relation between your new child. So it was a very long period, 10 years, and it was the possibility to create some professional discuss about what is it exactly the queer position and what is it exactly, this situation of what is the gender, what is it identity, what is it sexuality, and to create some meeting point and some time I think workshop and no, it was really during 10 years a very intense moment of reflection and meeting.
And what glory! I've not experienced that piece live. I've experienced the one piece that we're going to be talking about, the mother house.
Mother house. Yeah.
You saw what I did that. But I have not experienced that piece live. But watching videos of those pieces is the sense of the depth of the work, and I'm hearing this now over those 10 years is powerful. It's powerful. I've read somewhere before that you talk about the flesh, not only your flesh as a performer, but the flesh of the audience. Is that, yeah. Tell me about that relationship between your flesh and the flesh of the audience, or your art or your creation and the objects you're manipulating.
I think it's really the point of what is it, a queer performance?
Yeah.
Because the flesh, it's really the relation of queer. What I want to be in my flesh, that's the philosophy of the queer. And in fact, it's very important to try to transmit in audience this kind of philosophy, because it's a possibility to everybody to understand, okay, what is it exactly the problem if I decide to be something like this, or to love something like this, or to practice something like this? It's only a problem of a judgment by friends, family, society. But when you transform this possibility to say, okay, you know why you feel you are in the judgment, it's only because you decide to say, okay, I'm agree to be judged. But in fact, it's a fake. If we decide to be a woman or a male or nothing, or gender fluid or something, and decide to be only in the true relation between another person, perhaps it should be very interesting. But in fact, it's a work, like the life. When you decide to be on life, you decide to be strong. You decide to accept some problems of relation. And in this, it's a very, it's this relation of flesh to say, okay, very often we are so afraid by it's strange, because in French it's very intense sense about flesh in the society. La peau,
la chair.
what is it? La peau, la chair. And that's the reason I say I never speak to the brain of audience, I speak by the flesh. Because by the flesh, it's your sensation. It's an organic relation, not an education relation. And for me, it's more interesting. Because in fact, in the flesh, you are in this situation of improve your own relation of your body. And that's a good example. For example, when I was in PPP during the show, it was a moment I was just on stage. There's something like a bed, but this bed was in ice. And at one moment, it was a very amazing situation because I just put off my dress and I go in my bed, so the bed is in ice. And when I just stand on the bed, I can hear all the audience keep that doing because it was a projection. Their project their body in my body, project the flesh. So but it's really interesting.
And how queer is that? That's that. Yes.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
yeah,
That is,
yeah, yeah, exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So shall we now mention the Maison, and now I know they're the two translations, but I will come home to the mother house. So I was able to see that piece, and I will tell you, I was moved in ways I was not expecting to be moved. I carried that at least for 5 days of what had happened to me and what I had experienced during the journey that you had taken me on. I'm wondering, can you? I know this is a big piece. Do I understand you're coming off of also the premiere at Avignon, that you finished the trilogy? Is that
Yeah,
correct? So, do you mind
exactly.
telling us maybe about this trilogy? What what are your impulses? What are your hopes, if there are any? What is going to happen to those of us who are watching it?
So the base, it was a comment. So for me in 2017, I was invited by Paul B. Preciado, the philosopher, to be in the Kassel visual arts meeting and to create something about two subjects. It was learn to attend and for a parliament of bodies.
Oh, okay.
So it was very interesting question, and
Those
for
aren't
me,
small questions. Those are not small
yeah,
questions.
no. So in fact, it's very interesting because I live in Europe. I'm from France, and I'm very. I want to see Europe. I want to see Europe because it's for me very important to understand the power of Europe, and so during this period, I searched what exactly I want to create, and I decided to create some tales, and those tales should be interesting if they are immoral. So I decided to create immoral tales, and it was a reflection about this tales of three pigs. And I decided to create a first with Athena, who tried to build a Parthenon, like she received this Parthenon by IKEA. So she just buy a paper card, a very big paper card, and you do it your Parthenon, do it yourself your Parthenon. So it was a joke, but really it was the basis of this creation, and to play Athena like a punk on stage. It's really amazing. And for the second part, it was important to continue this reflection about architectural, about Europe and different way, and the three pigs. So the second part, it's 5 person, 4 slave on stage and 1 dominator, and they built a tower like the Babel Tower. So the 4 slaves, 2 male and 2 female, and there's a woman like a very like a preach, like I think it's a sadomasochist situation, because she just stay and watch this forced slave, and they say very often, okay, it's necessary to build this engine, because the machine is my master and the machine is my god. So it's a reflection about this society, the ultra-liberal society.
Sure. Yeah.
And about what is it, the submission and
Domination. Yeah.
domination. So the second part is this, and they never finish the tower because the tower is continue more high and more high, and the audience never can't see the final of this tower. So that's the reality of our society, and really I say we just built a dick on stage, a very big dick.
Yeah. Well.
And because during all the show, the dominator just orgasm. It's just a voice of orgasm. So it's very queer.
It's
And
language that I understand.
yeah, and the third part, it's very strange because it's me on stage alone. I'm on the top of this tower. I just go back on the ground, totally naked, and I go at the middle of audience. And just after I am in the audience, a very big plastic fall down on the stage, and like it's a very dangerous situation, like Chernobyl or something like this. And I decide to paint this. So I paint this and I finish in some black river on stage.
Wow.
To explain what is it exactly the position of an artist today when the theater can be closed. So it was a reflection about what is it, because the basis was, okay, apprendre, learn to attend.
Yeah.
Okay, we can learn to attend, but parliament of bodies, it's different. Now I can say during this pandemic period, in France, in many countries in Europe, theater was closed. And for me, it was very important to say, okay, if they can close theater one day, they can close for every day. So it's dangerous. So I think the third stage, it's a manifest, really, to say, okay, now it's very important to defend theater, defend art.
And in the context of all that you have spoken to us about, that also is a queer posture, supporting art that powers can close from us, becomes it's a political gesture, it's a queer gesture. We must have our flesh together.
Yeah,
our flesh together.
And now I think it's the most important work we must do, because in this society, the fear, create fear, it's easy, every day. And now, how we can continue to feel the possibility of, okay, to accept the others, to accept the possibility to death, to die.
Yeah, right, 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 right.
And
Which is also a queer, right, queer, that's very queer.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, the living, in the living is dying, and in the dying is living. That's, yeah, and we must do this work together. Oh, I'm intrigued. I'm going to take notes afterwards. Aha. Aha. I do have one last question for you, if I can, as we turn to the close of this of the recording part of this. A question I'm asking other people in the series is how people who don't necessarily identify their own difference, right, or who identify as different. Sometimes in English, we call these individuals maybe allies. So how is it that, what do we want to know from our allies to be able to have a yet even more queer circus, a more queer performance, a more queer life, a more queer world? What is it that, what maybe we can ask from the world?
It's very complex because
I know, sorry.
I think the most important, if it's the queer become not necessary, it should be a victory, because in fact queer, it's a reaction to say, okay, what is it exactly your problem with me, with us, because we don't have problem with you.
Yeah.
But in fact, if you say it's a problem, we are not the problem, you are the problem. So for me, is most important, it should be, if one day we don't use this word queer, it's become okay, it was a word, and now we live like we want. So it should be the most project, because create the word queer to a revendication is very interesting. But in fact, it's more interesting if the revendication disappear, because it's become natural in the society. So, you know, it's a dream to say, okay, I remember when I was student with the choreographer Hervé Diasnaz, during 2 years we practiced very intensive on the forest, and we practiced dance just behind the forest, and it was so strange. And every time he said to me, you know, you must be a smoke in the smoke. So it was very strange to say that. And because we at this period we practiced a very slow dance, very slow, during 1, 2, 3 hours. And one day there's a rabbit who just passed behind the 4 dancers who are dancing, but it was so slow, and the rabbit doesn't see anything. And we are dancing, and this rabbit stay at the middle, watch around, and we disappear, and we were the smoke in the smoke. So perhaps if we can transmit queer like this, queer in the queer, and disappear.
I love. That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Nothing.
Thank you. I think on those words, I'm just going to say thank you again. The viewers and the listeners I'm sure this will be a fascinating journey. You can see I've been moved and I've been touched here. Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you too.